Welcome to India Lab 2024. It's my privilege to introduce Dr. Arasi Maran, who is an associate professor at Medical University of South Carolina and is also the cath lab director at the VA
Hospital. Yes.
in Charleston, South Carolina. So, great. Thanks for being here. So first, I have to kind of ask you the most obvious question. Why CTOs?
Well, why not CTOs? I think, when I finished training, interventional cardiology was dividing into structural world, peripheral world, and the CTO world. And I was wondering what I would want to do. I think the stubbornness of a chronic total lesion matches the stubbornness of me as a person. So we aligned well together. And honestly, in all seriousness, when I went for a CTO course, I fell in love with the technique, the challenge, and I wanted to really advance my skill as a coronary operator. And I think learning CTO PCI gets you there. And patients who are with CTO also, as you know, they are pretty much given no hope, right? They said nothing can be done. This is the end of the life. Learn to live with your symptoms, take more medications. So, and when you are able to offer them a hope, a chance that you could open this, you make a difference. And why do we do medicine? To make a difference, right? So this is my way of making a difference.
I think that really resonates. I think that would resonate with a lot of people that are into cardiology for this reason, right? So, no, that being said, you probably chose the hardest peak to climb. And I'm sure the path was not without challenges. Especially, being in the US, having a family, raising 3 kids. You're wearing many hats and you're balancing a lot of stuff. How do you do it? What would be your advice? Especially I think to women that are cardiologists in our country, what are some of the challenges that you face? And I think if you could share some of that and how you overcame that, that would be very helpful.
Yes, great question. Yes, it is a hard path, but what is not easy? Doing medicine was hard and cardiology was hard, interventional cardiology was hard. But I was in love with everything I did. I was not doing it because somebody else told me to do it or something like that. I enjoy coming to work every day. So how do I manage the home front? With a lot and lots of help. It's a very organized / disorganized chaos. And, I thankfully have a very helpful spouse. But I, outsource everything. Whatever does not have value, I outsource it. So having training was the hardest part, to get CTO training, right? Because I came in the year where dedicated CTO fellowship was still not in vogue.
Right.
So I, flew to Washington, University of Washington, found Dr. Bill Lombardi, trained with him, made him come here. I pretty much trained with a series of proctors, almost every 3 months or something. I would collect cases, have proctors come and proctor me. And that's how I learned to do CTO PCI. And everything else, if you find your passion, and you have a purpose for your passion, everything else falls into place. They say, right, when you find a reason, where there's a will, there will be a way. Otherwise, there's only excuses.
So, in summary, you say, okay, pick something that you love,
yes,
right? That makes it a lot easier and more palatable. And number 2, outsource anything that you don't have to do. For those people that can afford to do it, I think that's great advice. And so along the journey, right? So you kind of mentioned going to another institute to get trained, and then kind of doing the whole reverse thing, like having someone to come and proctor. Do you want to kind of talk a little bit about how important proctors are in the process?
Absolutely.
And because we don't have a lot of structured interventional programs in India, as you're probably well aware. So let alone CHIP or CTO fellowships. So given where we are here, what would be your take?
Absolutely. I think proctorship is extremely important. And going to other people's lab, you might think you're passively standing, but even when you're passively standing and watching them do, you're picking up so many different things. You may not know it now, but when you come back to your lab, you'll be like, oh, I saw this being done, so I'm going to do this. We all know medicine is see one, do one, teach one, so just you are seeing one, and that is learning. And when you have a proctor come to your lab, the proctor is basically an accessory set of brain, and they are basically coaching you to do something, right? So it's like having a coach, and the coach is like, do this. And when you follow it, it might be uncomfortable, but you just have to learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable and do the hard things. Proctorship for especially CTOs in a country like India, where there's no structured fellowship, you have to use your proctors as much as you can, and the proctors also become a source of call a friend or phone a friend when you're in trouble with the case. They also become a source of reviewing a case for you before and planning your own things. So I think there are multiple roles a proctor does apart from just being your coach. So yes, I used all my proctors. They're all my friends. I have called, FaceTime them at like 9 o'clock in the evening when I'm in trouble, early in the morning. I mean, just use everything you have to get the job done well.
Yeah, and no, I think that was very nicely put, and it really also drives home the point. Not just your proctors, but like having a sense of community, I think, is really important, and that's something that my own journey, like in terms of the transition, like in the US, it's a lot easier to say, hey, like, okay, I need a second opinion here, and it's easy to dial a friend, right? And that's something that we have tried to inculcate, like as we had like training people, proctoring, etc. Is like it's okay because we have all done mistakes, we have all had complications, we've all had bad days,
yes,
and it's okay. You don't have to be a hero every day, every time. And in the US, like did you have like what were some of the challenges? What was going on in your brain? Did you feel like, oh my God, they're gonna think I suck? They're gonna What were some of the thoughts in your head? If you don't mind sharing that, I think that'd be really useful.
The imposter syndrome when you first start doing a CTO is real. It's the elephant in the room, right? Because you're just learning to do things and you are going against the norms. You're like knuckling and intentionally dissecting a vessel. The sensation is real, but that's where your proctors come in, or your seniors who've been there. As you said, the wheel has been invented. They have made their mistakes, so you learn from them. The biggest reason or the biggest thing is, why are you doing the CTO PCI? If you're doing it because you're trying to get better with your skills and not for the patient, then no. Okay, when you have a complication, you are devastated. But if you're doing it for the right reason, this patient is extremely symptomatic. He needs this. The quality of life is going to be absolutely miserable if you don't intervene. And you talk informed consent, a patient-centric informed consent. This is the good which can come. This is the bad that can happen. And this is the worst scenario. And all of that, unfortunately, is on the plate. And if the patient comes back to you after you've told them the risks and benefits, the patient really wants it, then it's your job to do the best you can. We are human. We all have limitations. So despite our best efforts, a complication happen. If you've done the background work of informing the patient, educating the patient, they are not going to be, a thing. And you can also go back home and go to bed and sleep like, I'm not some horrible person who did a crazy thing, etc. You can give yourself grace.
Right.
And the other thing is, learn from that, whatever complication happened, dissect it like crazy, do a proper postmortem of the complication, debrief your team, call your whatever proctors or your community, and go over the case over and over again. Learn from that complication so that you can prevent it. That's how you get better, and that's how you manage all of this.
Let me ask you, like in this journey, right, of CTOs and complex PCI, etc., what was your biggest challenge and how did you overcome it?
My biggest challenge so I started with wire escalation, got very good with wire escalation. It was time to move to ADR, and to make the jump was so scary because you build your comfort zone. After you build an ADR, 10 to 15 successful ADR cases, it was time to do a retrograde case. So that taking the jump was extremely hard. Okay, I thought that jump was then managing your first perforation, and then processing that complication in your head. In the beginning, it was really, really hard. There are times like I would get totally depressed and, I'm the worst human being. I'm not fit to practice medicine. This is terrible. Big dramatic, big emotions. Then, I got coached by Bill Lombardi. And the first question he asks is always, did you do it for the right reason? And I said, yes. Why do you think you did it for the right reason? And these would be the evidence. And it's like, if you've done your best and this was a thing, learn, get better. So I always go to the complications course, or wherever there's any talk on complications, I go there. So the challenge is managing my mind, because you are doing hard things and expanding your boundary. I think that is probably the biggest thing. And that's probably in every field, not just in CTO PCI.
So I'm just going to switch gears a little bit and also ask you this. How do you protect yourself? Like, I mean, so again, India is a different environment than the US, but you've grown up here. So I'm just going to kind of ask you this. So how do you ensure that, and let me actually split this question into two parts. Like the first one being that you talked about informed consent, right?
Yes.
Many times people like auto-tune, once you kind of, they hear the word, oh, there's risk. They're like, okay, thanks, but no thanks, right? The conversation is over. So that's the first challenge that I think a lot of Indian operators have to overcome.
Absolutely.
Is because you have to tell them, hey, it's still probably the right thing to do. If it were my mom and dad, I would do it, kind of deal. And the second part is, how do you also ensure that tomorrow, right? I mean, you said, hey, I'm doing a lot of things which the community around you as cardiologists don't do. Like you do it for the right reasons.
Yes.
And let's say you have a complication or whatever. And then you have other people dissecting this work and saying, oh my God, they use this wire. I would never use this wire.
Yes.
So how do you, and you don't want Monday morning quarterback from people that don't even do this. How do you protect yourself?
So it's education. You show that you are not the only person, the evidence behind it. You show them. So I have stood on our monthly morbidity and mortality meeting in front of general cardiologists, cardiothoracic surgeons, and I had to show my complication and explain to them why this was the choice, and then say, oh, this, I know this seems very strange to you, but this is the practice. Show them the algorithms, and that's where the CTO community has done a great job of their publications, the Open CTO, Progress CTO, all the registries. This is what has been done. I know it sounds crazy that I actually dissected a vessel, but that was an intentional, controlled dissection process. But like any, so you educate. Education is a big thing. Yes. Was it pleasant standing in front of everyone and, but that's the job. That's what needs to be done. And you just have to, make sure you are doing it for the right reason. I would go back to that. And you were talking about informed consent, etc. There are, when a patient comes to me, the first thing I tell them is, you have to convince me that you want the job has to be done. I'm not going to convince you. Your life needs to be miserable despite medications. Only then I'm going to do it. If you are happy and doing whatever you want to do, then maybe you don't need this done. This is not a Botox injection. There are big consequences to this procedure. And if you are, so we're doing, and sometimes when I'm talking to them, I don't talk to the patient, I actually talk to the spouse, because they have to know why this is being done. And and I also tell them, please don't decide today, go home. And I also tell them, if this is my experience, but there are, just across in Atlanta, there are bigger centers with more experience. Feel free to go. And when you are very open and honest with the patient, they learn to trust you, that this doctor is not, selling a procedure,
right?
And I think that's important, that you don't sell CTO PCI. Let them come to you. If their quality of life is bad enough, they'll come to you. And those are the right patients you should be treating.
So, so basically what you're saying is like, make sure it's appropriate patients, do it for the right reasons, right indications. Of course, go through the process, get trained, and be very transparent.
Yes.
Right. Tell them about the risks that you think there would be, might be, and the potential benefits. So we're probably running out of time, but let me ask you this. If you had to do this all over again, let's say you go back to your cardiology fellowship, you're like a newly graduated fellow, given what you know now today in all the various aspects in interventional cardiology, would you still choose to be a CTO chip person? Would you say, oh my God, huge mistake, I would have done structural, that's the way of the future? So what would you do? Would you do it again?
Yes. So I finished, I'm going to age myself here, but it doesn't matter. I finished my fellowship in 2012. My CTO journey started in 2015, 2016. If I have to go all over again, I would have started my CTO journey at 2013. I would have sought them out. I would have done it earlier, and I would have, gained more time. This is, I know it looks like I went to CTO PCI, But I think my life changed after doing CTO PCI. Because CTO PCI is all about don't be stuck in one thing, just keep changing, don't be fixed, be facile and go from one approach to another approach. Honestly, I have taken that approach all across every aspect of my life. I'm not stuck, this is the only way with my child. I'm like, okay, this approach is not working. Let's try something else. So CTO PCI has changed my life, and I truly wish I had found it sooner than later.
Great. Thanks, Dr. Arasi. Thanks a lot for your time. Really
Thank you, Arun. I enjoyed myself.
Thank you, Arasi.
Insights from the world's best medical minds. You are watching TheRightDoctors.com.